by pressure. I didn't want to lose my job, certainly. So yes, those have a real power role.
Well, when you mentioned earlier, when you talk about bigots, you talk about people whose mind is made up. And I was just curious, since you were an officer of the Air and Navy and so on, what brought this change into you? How did you change, and how can that be applied to others?
Well, for myself, it took something personal, very personal, in that Duke had gave me, and numerous times it happened, an intellectual argument, and I could have debated it with you. We could have debated history, religion, the Bible, but simply would turn around and walk away, or tell myself in the biblical sense you didn't have the eyes to see or the ears to hear, so you weren't biblically aware. I would just let it kind of run off my back. A lot of times when white people would get in my face and scream and yell at me, I thought, well, they see something in me that's a numb, they just don't want to admit it. But it took something personal in that being told that my son would have to be euthanized or killed because he was a genetic defect. He'd been born with a cleft palate. The light went on, but that wasn't an instantaneous thing. I was told that in April of 1992. It took me till July to build up the courage to leave, because this had become family. This had become the thing that motivated me. I got respect, I got self-esteem. I had people who told me on a constant daily basis that we love you, you're family, we do things together. I went from milking cows in 1989, never giving a talk, never writing anything, never doing an interview in my life, to being in Newsweek a year later. People called me in from around the world for my opinion. On the compound, I had authority over people, tell them what time to go to bed, what time to get up, what to eat, because we followed certain dietary laws at the time. There was that aspect. This was the thing that had made me who I was, made me a person. But at the same time, I couldn't reconcile internally that was wrong to say about my son, who had bothered absolutely no one and was born the way he was. Then how was it all right for me to think and to publicly say the same thing about people who were born different than I was, without being a hypocrite? Now, change hasn't come from reading a book or sitting in on a lecture. Change has come from the very people that I hated the most. Reached out to me, Leonard Zeskin from the Center for Democratic Renewal, a Jewish man, and Loretta Ross, an African-American woman from the CDR. Because when I left Aryan Nations, I went and lived in a tent. I had no friends outside the racist movement, no family ties outside the racist movement. And Leonard and Loretta got in touch with me via the police department in Ohio and said, if you need someone to talk to, we're here. Well, first I was floored. Here were the people that I hated. And not only just hated because of their race and their religion, but also their politics. Here was, and they're like, if you want someone to talk to. And because I've traveled so much, I've met people of all races and faiths, and it's been challenging. Probably one of the most graphic is I was asked to testify at the Montana State Senate to include sexual orientation as a malicious harassment law. I've been under the racist movement for almost a year. I'm patting myself on the back. Boy, I've made strides. I'm not a bigot. I don't have any bigoted ideas. I'm just moving right along here. And the night before we had the meeting, or before we had to testify, we had a meeting sponsored by the Montana Human Rights Network to strategize, to figure out what order we were going to speak in and what we were going to say, the rules, so forth. I walked into that room and 67% of people in the room were gay and lesbian. Now, intellectually, I told myself one thing. Dealing with it on an emotional gut level was something else. My voice dropped. I went over here, stood next to a woman. All I could think of was the men were going to hit on me, the women were going to hit me. I don't know, I broke out into a sweat. And I stood up and said, I don't know if I can do this. And we talked about it till 2 in the morning. So when I did testify the next day, it wasn't an intellectual exercise. But that came through challenging. When I was in Hanover, Pennsylvania, a year ago, this young man stood up and said, I don't want to be around black folks, they commit all the crimes. I could have given him a statistical argument, I could have told him, look, I'm right and you're wrong. Instead, at lunch hour, we went down to county jail in this all-white county. Because if black folks commit all the crimes, then this jail would be empty, would it not? He was able to confront reality versus a stereotype. By challenging, letting him see for himself that crime is a matter of economics and individual, not racial. So again, it was breaking the stereotype with the reality. Much for myself, breaking the stereotypes with the reality. Hasn't been easy. And to tell you I'm never going to have a bigoted or prejudiced thought, unconscious thought, again, is ludicrous. No. But recognizing it and addressing it and dealing with it. And if it's something that I can't deal, with at that present moment or whatever, I know that I have plenty of friends I can pick the phone up and talk to. You know? Making a change, first of all, I don't think a person makes a change and it stops. I think change is constant and ongoing. For myself, changing was not only political and religious ideas, and you got emotional ideas. It was changing the way of walking, the way of talking, the way of combing my hair, changing what I ate. It was and has been and is. I find for myself some of the hardest attitudes to get over are attitudes towards women, because even though no one sat me down at the age of 5 and 6 and said, "We want you to join the Klan and be a racist, be a bigot," I was sat down by the Baptist and Methodist ministers and my high school teachers and my elementary teachers and my parents, sat down and taught what my role as a man was. My sisters had what their role was as a woman. So getting them over sexist ideas have actually been some of the hardest, because it has so ingrained. And I went to Bible classes as a youngster where I was taught that homosexuals were evil, horrible people. You know, that was something that was not only society taught me, but was sat down and drilled into me. Were attitudes about people of color, black folks, Hispanic people, Jewish people, were the comments, the things that I saw coming via these cameras, via the newspapers and so forth. You know? And the other is, here in the Northeast, we all think we're too educated and sophisticated to be bigots. I'll point out what I consider an interesting coincidence. I'm from Cortland, New York. 2 counties away, Chris Temple came from, and Chris Temple's the top racist leader in the state of Montana. Randall Terry, the founder of Operation Rescue, is from Binghamton, New York, 28 miles to the south of me. The Timothy McVeigh was like 100 miles to the west of me. We all are white males, roughly within the same age group, that came out of the same geographic region of upstate New York. You know, I don't think it was the water, so it had to be the environment. You know, and the Northeast has been overlooked because somehow we were too educated and sophisticated to be bigots. Now we're finding out that, whoa, we've got a problem here that outweighs anything that's presently going on, let's say in the South. You know, the bigots, especially in Pennsylvania, have landed 3 nationally known white supremacist leaders who are living in Pennsylvania. It's only been recently, in the last year and a half, that people are doing anything. It hasn't been just because of Floyd Cochran, part of it. And the other part has been that people are, again, because of the stepped up racist attacks, people are doing something. But at the same time, how do you combat someone who is an elected official and who 2 months ago, and this person is a county commissioner, stood up and said, when she dies and goes to heaven, she's going to look out from heaven and look down and see Jews going snap, crackle, and pop. And then nobody organized, nobody said a word, did a thing. Oh, it was printed in the newspaper. A month later, the synagogue in York, Pennsylvania was desecrated, and on the side was wrote, snap, crackle, and pop. 700 people marched because the Nazis are here among us. They weren't willing to march or say anything when this elected official was echoing these words. But the minute the Nazis did it, you know, now I'm not trying to make Nazis look any better, but if we don't address society's bigotry and hold this person responsible who's an elected official by saying things, then we're going to be here all day long talking about neo-Nazis. It's really easy to point at people with a swastika and say, hey, there's a bigot. I'm not a bigot. Well, while you're looking at the bigots over here, look at yourself too. And that's what I'm hoping that I'm doing by traveling, pointing out to people. I just did one day wake up and say, oh, I'm going to join the Klan today. I'm kind of like bored, and you know, there's nothing else to do here in this town. It was a progression, and somebody pressed the buttons, and I responded. And the bigots are pressing the buttons, and they're doing it in a mass propaganda way of doing it.
Well, I wondered if you could talk about the leaderless resistance.